The reading today is taken from Psalm 127. Unless the Lord builds the house, the builders labor in vain. Unless the Lord watches over the city, the guards stand watch in vain. In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat. For the Lord grants sleep to those he loves. Children are a heritage from the Lord, offspring a reward from him. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are children born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. They will not be put to shame when they contend with their opponents in court. The Lord blesses the readings from his holy word. Amen.
We're in the midst of a series of sermons on the Psalms of Ascent, which are the songs that the pilgrims sang as they went up to Jerusalem for the big festivals. Psalm 127 is an interesting one because it's not a psalm of praise as such. It's a reminder. Israel's not a big country, certainly by South African standards. In fact, the whole of Israel would fit into the Kruger National Park. But since most people travelled on foot in the time that we're considering, it could have taken several days to reach Jerusalem to celebrate one of the great festivals. This meant that they would have to leave behind young children and the elderly, as well as their homes. And that's why the title comes in as a psalm of trust. As the pilgrims travelled up to celebrate God's goodness and his choice of Israel in Jerusalem, they sang this song to remind them that even the most mundane of life experiences are in fact the work of God. They've left behind their homes, sometimes their families, most of their belongings, in order to attend a great festival. But they're able to trust that God will sustain and protect what they have left behind. At face value, this psalm is a confession of dependency on God and a reminder that even our most mundane moments are a reflection of his grace. In the Hebrew Bible, the psalm is attributed to Solomon, and it must have been written quite early on in his life, when he was well aware of his position, his power, and his wealth were all a gift from God. Later he went on to forget this, and his legacy was a broken country and a broken nation. What the psalm is remembering is that nothing is really the product of our own effort, for it can all be swept away in an instant. Instead, the psalm encourages us to receive all of life as a gift of grace. Even procreation, which seems to be a natural outflow of our humanity, is attributed to God. The psalmist points out that even our children are a gift from him. The Jewish understanding of Jerusalem was that the temple was God's home address. Even though God is the creator of all things, he had chosen to be especially present, first of all in the tabernacle and later on in the temple. And pilgrims approaching Jerusalem would have marveled at the beauty of the city and the magnificence of the temple. But the psalm reminds them to look beyond that and to see the originator of both the nation and the city. Sometimes in our conversation we talk about a self-made man or woman, and certainly Solomon could have claimed to be such a person. But in the end, no one is self-made. We are all a product of God's grace. It is tempting for those who are rich or powerful to try to leave behind them some sort of legacy so that they will be remembered. Yet the psalmist points out that it's really only our children who are a gift, who become our legacy. The title of this sermon is A Song of Trust. And although at first reading, the psalm seems to be about letting God do everything, the value is not in criticism of those who don't trust God, but in encouragement that we should trust God completely. It's no good expounding on our own efforts to become rich or famous or even popular, unless we are able to identify the work of grace in our lives. We may well be drawn into that worldly pattern. But it is important to remember the words right in the middle of this psalm. God gives rest to those he loves. It is this promise of rest or sleep that encourages our trust. Unless we are able to trust God, life becomes a frantic search for our own way of doing things, as well as for security, safety, and love. Trusting God and believing that we fit into the description of those he loves makes it possible for us to live differently. The challenge for us today is to change the focus of our trust. We're constantly being encouraged to trust all manner of things and people, but only God is trustworthy in the end. Just as those traveling to Jerusalem sang about God's action rather than their own, so we too can join in their song. Just as they rejected a world which clamored for attention and indulgence, so we too can seek to serve only God, trusting that our lives and legacy are more about God than they are about us. Amen.